City Council. So that's tomorrow. It'll be at AgriLand training facility, and we'll start at 3 o'clock with the forum beginning at 3:45, and it'll run till about 6:30 tomorrow. And then we have our Ag Roundtable on Friday, focused on estate planning and whatnot. That will be at 11 o'clock on Friday the 19th, I think it is. And that's at the community college. And then we also have our annual meeting and Ag Harvest Celebration on October 28th at the Chowchilla Fairgrounds. And we have Bob Farmer from Farmer's Almanac. It will be our entertainment for the evening.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, Mark Hudson with the Triangle Tea Ranch, Triangle Water District. I'm not sure we're filing for adjudication, first time for everything.
Yeah, so we're actually going to be talking about that, and that's item number 5B.
Will the public have an opportunity to participate in the discussion?
Yes. Now, whether we can answer all the questions from the board is that, or I'm sorry, questions from the public is another question, because we haven't actually effectuated the filing yet. Obviously, in that type of posture, there will be things that we can talk about, but I think we're going to do our best to explain what the proceeding is and what we're ultimately doing.
I won't say anything else.
Anybody else?
Okay, we're going to recess as the MID Board of Directors and convene as the MID Groundwater Sustainability Agency. We have A, update on MID GSA, the draft presentation from Madera Basin Technical Workshop, and an update on MID GSA progress on recommendation for groundwater level monitoring network. And that's coming in.
You get to start this today.
So we do have a presentation. What's coming up, actually, Thursday, we do have a technical workshop that's going to be held with Oregon Madera Sub-Basin as a whole, and we'll be going through numbers. So what we'd like to do today is present our component of that presentation to the MID board, and of course those members of the public. Just as a reminder, and I'll bring it up again later, but we'll refer to at 2:30 on Thursday at the Frank Bergman Senior Center, there's Management, downtown Madera. So I encourage all of you here to participate in that event also. But we did want to give a preview of the MID component that we'll be presenting at that meeting and giving comments or concerns from the board and the public. I'll hand over to Tina.
Yeah, so for the past few months, we've been working as a technical expert group with the GSAs in the Madera Sub-Basin, and we're getting to the point where we're ready for a public technical workshop. So this is the MID component of the technical workshop that will occur on Thursday. But again, this is the workshop on Thursday for the entire sub-basin, so they'll be giving an overview of the entire sub-basin, and each GSA will be presenting on its own. So this is a sneak peek of the Madera portion, of the MID portion. My understanding is the formatting has slightly changed, that we are consistent across all GSAs, but the information is the same. So MID GSA, we have a total acreage of about 134,000 acres. The MID GSA excludes the city of Madera, which the majority of the city of Madera is in MID itself, and also Madera Water District. So when we were forming GSAs, the city of Madera opted to form its own GSA, and Madera Water District opted to form its own GSA. The MID GSA is essentially the acreage of MID with exclusion of the city of Madera and Madera Water District. The irrigated agricultural acreage in MID GSA itself is 106,000 acres approximately. And we're kind of the golden color on this one. So we are working through these numbers with not only our own technical consultants, Corolla Engineers, but also Davis Engineering. We've worked through historic water supplies and land use from the period that we've been looking at is 1989 through 2014, so approximately a 25-year time period. The chart on this side shows the land, shows the current water balance for the 2015 land use. And that shows, over here shows, hold on, new technology. A balance of close to 26,500 acre feet deficit using 2015 land use. Going back and just looking at our overall historic water balance, so that's using that land uses in, for instance, 1989 with water supplies in 89, land uses in 1990 with water supplies in 1990. MID is very close to balance when looking at that time frame with only negative 1,800 acre feet of deficit over that time period. So again, very close to balance using historic land use and also using the 2015 data. So there's a negative 26,500 acre feet with 2015 land use data. And essentially the difference between these two numbers is the land use. So mainly the cropping patterns have changed between 1989 and 2015, and we have higher water intensity crops being planted within the district. So what's being planned by the MID GSA to close this deficit by 2040? So again, SGMA requires that GSAs are in balance by 2040. MID, again, the numbers we were looking at on the last slide were 2015 numbers. So between 2015 and as we sit here today in 2018, MID has already been working hard to come to balance with the MID GSA and has completed a number of different projects and programs related to groundwater. So we have rehabilitated and begun utilizing 8 recharge basins throughout our district. We have installed over 12,000 feet of pipeline. We have put in system automation, including SCADA and automated gates, at close to 54 sites throughout the district. We have annexed Madera Ranch into the district. So the district, MID previously owned the ranch, but it was not part of MID itself. That annexation was completed just recently. We have initiated an on-farm recharge program, and we've been acquiring and importing additional surface water supply the last few years. This has given us an annual average of approximately 10,000 acre feet more that goes towards meeting that balance. However, there's still deficit, so MID, what we're planning on doing between now, 2018, and 2040, is we have a number of other projects and programs that we are looking at and already initiating work on. So we are looking at additional recharge basin acquisition. We're actually currently in the process of acquiring a 22-acre recharge facility right now. We're also looking at developing water supplies through partnerships with other agencies, enhancing our on-farm recharge program. So we've done that the last couple of years as pilot programs, but really formalizing that program, and exploring new fee structures and incentive-based programs for the MID GSA. As far as demand management goes for the MID GSA, we are not anticipating the need for demand management if we can continue to enhance our water supply. So at this point in time, as we sit here in 2018, if we can achieve our balance through these additional projects and programs, we are not looking at any sort of demand management in the MID GSA. So what might this look like in detail? Again, additional recharge basin acquisition. As I just mentioned, we are already in the process of acquiring a 22-acre recharge facility, development of partnerships and water supplies through those partnerships, enhancing our on-farm recharge programs, and exploring new fee structures and incentive-based programs. And so we're anticipating, through doing all of those things, the 10,000 acre feet here is what we've already done, 2015 through 2018 projects, and then the balance will be met through these additional projects. So the big question that we're hearing throughout the sub-basin and in the area is, so how much can I, as a landowner, in the MID GSA pump? And again, this is MID GSA specific. The MID GSA has decided to take a district-wide sustainability approach, which means that we're managing the district as a whole, not on an individual parcel basis. And so again, at this time, we're not anticipating the need for any demand management, which equates to pumping restrictions within the MID GSA if we can continue to enhance our water supply. So what does this mean to me as a landowner in the MID GSA? It means we're going to have to continue to invest in water supply projects and programs. And these projects and programs do come at an expense, but they are achievable. And so that's what we're really going to need to focus on as a district. We're going to need stakeholder and landowner participation programs, such as on-farm recharge programs, when those are available. And we're going to need to analyze our current assessment and water pricing structures. What else does this mean to me as a stakeholder in the MID GSA? In the MID GSA, itself, we are not anticipating the need to require water meters. There was a Madera County water meter ordinance, so you will be required from that perspective, but from the MID GSA perspective, we are not anticipating requiring water meters at this time. But you will probably be able, or you will probably likely see water levels continue to drop in the MID GSA because they're going to continue to decline until our entire basin becomes sustainable. We as a GSA can become sustainable in the very near future with these projects and programs we described, but our water levels are impacted by the entire subbasin. So while the entire subbasin, comes to sustainability within the next 20 years or so, you can likely see, the water levels in your personal wells continue to drop in the MID GSA. And that's essentially the MID GSA presentation. Again, each GSA is going to be presenting on Thursday with their own information. We did try to make this a uniform across the basin where each GSA is answering the same questions for their stakeholders.
So this is very positive news for MID, and it is something that I think at staff level we feel we can accomplish in achieving ultimate sustainability by 2040. I do want to emphasize, though, there's still a lot of work to be done. Just in my short time here at MID, you've seen the reliability of our surface water supply decline for a variety of reasons. But I've also seen the willingness of our village to participate in the program, including the on-farm recharge, where we kind of worked with a lot of different groups, a lot of willing participants who are willing to step up and put water on their land at their expense to help get water into the aquifer. And I think as we move forward through outreach and education, our growers are going to be willing to step up and take on this and be a helping hand in solving this problem here. So we still have a lot of work to be done within MID as we move forward implementing Sigma. But as a basin, we're a willing partner in that. We need to work with our neighbors to help get there and get there as soon as possible. There's still a big challenge basin-wide out there to deal with. So as we're working with them, we have been, our consultant, our hydrologist, has been working with the sub-basin-wide hydrologist for quite some time, over 6 months, comparing our analysis to their own. Over time, they've narrowed the gap on their two analysis and come very close to the point where we're very comfortable with those results. What's going on now is there are other agencies within the Madera sub-basin who are still working to refine the differences that their consultants are coming up with in comparison to what the sub-basin-wide consultant is developing. So that's still actively going on. We're hoping that they can resolve at least the majority of those by this week. We do need to get past those questions as soon as possible, as the plan needs to come together in the very near future. So that's still a work in progress. We're looking forward to seeing everybody's components in a similar format presentation this Thursday and see where everybody is and message of how they're going to achieve ultimate sustainability in 2040. So any comments that you have on the presentation or other things you'd like to see within it or something good and bad we'd like to do?
I still, as personally, just encourage any farmers out here, even though the meters are not going to be required, it is one of the best water management tools you have, is to have a meter on every source of your water so you know what you're doing.
I think that's a really good point, Carl. The MID GSA at this point is not requiring or anticipating requiring meters, but knowledge is power. And so, putting meters on, reading those meters, understanding how much groundwater you're utilizing, how much surface water you're utilizing, I think will only help landowners in the future.
Dina, clarification question. The GSA applies to first-class and subordinate water users both?
Correct. So anybody who is in Madera Irrigation District and is not within the city of Madera Madera Irrigation District who is not within the city of Madera or Madera Water District is in the MID GSA, subordinate and original.
Thank you.
Good question.
Other questions? So just as another next steps, we'll be working with the other agencies to compile all of these different approaches into one approach for a plan, and then determining if we can all come to an agreement on the implementation and phasing process of what these different programs for every different agency would look like and how they might impact each other. So you mentioned the presentation is important to realize that even if MID achieves ultimate water balance today, our water levels are going to continue declining because the sub-basin as a whole is not going to achieve for quite some time. So we need to understand the impacts of this planning effort, or what that means to our individual growers who may be at sustainability over the basin itself. Less the next day is laying all of that out in part of the development plan itself.
And you guys were put on
Okay. Any other questions?
We're on the update on MID GSA progress on recommendations of groundwater level monitoring network.
Yes, so we just wanted to give the board an update on this. We talked about this quite a few months back, but Morello engineers are engineering consultants for this work to advance innovative engineering. Back in February, developed a well monitoring network memo and identified areas where we needed to enhance our well monitoring network. And our engineering department over the last few months has been working very hard on this front. This is a map, just an update. So the dark purple wells are existing calcium wells on this map. The lighter purple dots on this map are proposed calcium wells. So those are wells where we actually have the well logs and the consent form, but they have not yet been entered into the calcium system because there is a process related to that. The blue dots are areas where we're still looking for further monitoring locations and wells associated that can be put in the calcium system. We do have some areas identified, but we're still working on the paperwork, and then some areas we don't have wells yet identified. So those are the blue dots on this map, which are kind of hard to see on the
Pretty
projection.
tough to see blue versus purple.
It's
Oh, that
an
color
eye
line
test
here,
here,
yeah.
Tim, so,
Yeah, they all
yes. Yeah, and then the yellow are actually wells that were identified and areas that were identified by Corollo for daily monitoring wells. And so we have 3 in that program, and that was Corollo's recommendation. And those are going to be coming online hopefully in the next couple months here. So we just wanted to make the board aware, our consultants identified areas where we need to enhance our network, and we are working on that. And this is both for calcium compliance along with bigger compliance.
Could you point out the so-called yellow well?
I sure can, like candy. I mean, so there's one right there. See it, all the purple?
Oh, okay,
Okay, there's one right there,
okay,
and there's one right there.
okay. Looks sort of orange to me, but,
We can debate out that. So that was just an update for the board on where we are at with this monitoring network. Any questions? And we appreciate everybody's participation, who has been participating. I know some of you are sitting in the room today, and so we do appreciate that. And if you have additional wells you would like added into the calcium system, if you would please contact our engineering department, we would greatly appreciate that.
but it's pretty obvious. We got an area up on the top, an area down there on the bottom, and an area on the west that wouldn't hurt to add some more wells.
Exactly, yes. We are always looking for new wells for this program.
The more data, the better. We'll take a look at it and see if they work with potassium, and if they're willing to participate, that would be fantastic.
We're going to adjourn as the MID GSA and reconvene as the MID Board of Directors. And we have items 2A, approval of the September 4th, 2018 special meeting minutes. 2B, discussion possible action on approval of the warrant list payments through October 16th, 2018. And 2C, discussion possible action on monthly financial reports for August and September.
On 2A, I don't know whether I'm supposed to pull it or just suggest 2 corrections. But 2 corrections. One, it shows that Rick entered at 146, and that was, or 26. That was due to the fact that he was being held out because of conflict of interest, and that's it. On the last item, we came out of closed session a second time after the regular meeting, and it does not show that we had no report provided.
And that's on page 3. The report will say there was no reportable action taken during either closed session, because we did go back.
And that one should be removed.
She has lots of
from consent.
question.
And that one should be removed from consent, vote on separately, and then vote the remainder of the consent.
Okay, I would move to vote on first, the consent item on 2B and 2C.
Okay, that's
That's first, second? Second. Okay. Any questions from the public? From the board? All in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed? Okay.
I would move to accept 2A with the correction.
Second. Okay. Any questions on that? From the public? From the board? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Informational items.
Yes, 3A, engineering department report, that's Eddie and Darren.
Okay, and for the first section, regarding the grants, just to touch on briefly, we have the water smart grants, which are the skate grants, involve the rooftop skates and skate sites. It's essentially wrapped up. We have a bit left to do on the on-site server, and one part of it is the waiting room that we're expecting to have out of the month. So basically, on the 13 locations regarding the skate grant. The 17 pipeline, Charles will likely have more detail on this, but the construction has commenced again, so that's well underway for this week now, regarding the 17. For the property course, the sediment removal has begun, and it's in October. I learned slightly after I submitted this that it's likely to go into possibly the first and second week of November as far as the sediment removal goes. And they're also working on possibly extending it to a longer time frame. It goes into next year to allow more time to remove additional sediment. So there's potentially a larger window that we'll have for that property grant.
Do you have very many people calling?
I don't have a full number. Darren visited the site earlier this week. How many miles do you say they kind of cleared roughly?
Upstream from 9 almost to back to 152, all in that area.
So out of that split.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But they have 2 big movers, pull sediment out there, so they move a lot of sediment pretty quickly.
And again, if people are interested in sediment, they can go to the county. Actually, Stephanie's here, and her office is working on the applications, and so you can apply. It's very easy, streamlined process, free process, so you can remove sediment, and it can go towards the grant asking for Madera time. Anything else? Okay. So we're encouraging everybody to take advantage of it at lots of fields.
For the Prop 1, there were some items sent out for regarding the agreement for the project sponsor, which would be the agency involved in the review. For 2 permits, basically the stream operation agreement that we submitted a notification for franchise Weir, and we're still waiting for response on that one. The agreement and notification regarding the Madera Lake Inlet diversion that was accepted. Now we're just waiting for the official agreement. Sorry, the notification was accepted. Now we're waiting for the agreement from DFW. For that one, we essentially have plenty of time, so it's expected to have it done in a year, basically. So we should be an issue now. And then the notification for the countywide creek and river, which is basically we're working on alongside with the county and what they did receive comments back. So they let me know that, and they essentially let us know that hey, if they need assistance, we let them know that we provide assistance for any questions that they may need from us. So on the Darren, certificate or the technical report?
Yeah, some of the ongoing projects that we have, the TV project, of course, the 6-2 pipeline. Nothing's really going on right now. They're going to install the automatic contract at the head, and other than that, we're waiting on pipe to be delivered and anticipating the whole year to start laying pipe again. Charles and I have a few things to go over, some of the safety things, guard, gravels, and welding and stuff to get installed within the year, so we reached out to him about that. The high-speed rail, that's another one. I think 6292 is going to start pipelining that portion. That's going to be a siphon. And 6213.4, which is across Avenue 9. That should be coming up shortly. There are ranch cattle wells still on hold, waiting for people to finalize the unit. Mountain facilities, we did go to Big Creek this last week. Installed some additional tampering signs, and we removed some debris that was left over from last winter in there. So that's all clean and ready for December. We open that up. West Perry's ongoing design that they're still working on that proposal. Did some GIS training, finished that. We have some money left over for encoders. We're going to get 3 additional SDR encoders. They're helping install by the beginning of the year. And the semi-annual town water measurement that we just talked about, that just started. So we're on our second day of measurements for that.
How many days that usually take to get through them all?
It's about 5 days. He does about 20 a day. There's like 100, but he'll go back through when he's done. There's a lot of people running right now, so he just skips those, and then at the end of it, he'll go back around to any of them that were running, help attention, and they're off. So it's about 5, 6 days.
Yeah, so again, the well run is third, and so we'll be ongoing for next week or so.
Questions for either one of them? Public? Thank you.
I just want to thank Karen and Eddie for keeping the engineering department going. The recruitment for the district engineer position, so thank you guys.
Okay, 3B, finance department report.
Good afternoon. So approximately 14,000 acre-feet of water was delivered to the original district lands, approximately 4,900 acre-feet to subordinate land, and approximately 840 acre-feet of operational management water for August and early September. Combined total water sales of approximately 2.6 million. The budget process for 2019 has started. We have 3 important dates. I sent out all the documents to the department heads on October 1st, but the 3 dates that are important are the reports, the budgets need to get back to me by November 5th, Monday, or back to finance by November 5th. And then the department heads will be meeting with the GM and assistant GM on Wednesday, November 14th. And then there'll be a special budget meeting on Wednesday, December 5th. So those 3 dates are the important dates we need to work on. And then the regular ongoing projects, like accounting departments handling the MID, the Madera Water Power Authority items. We're still doing the assessment billing, still cleaning up the assessments with the county. There were some parcels that we had to clean up because they couldn't bill or we couldn't bill. We're working on that, and Jen and I are, I think, basically doing a reconciliation with the county. They're small lots, so it's not a big difference in what we're doing. And then we've got the ongoing payroll for both MID and Mr. Derek for the water power.
Now that the tax bills are out, is anyone coming in trying to pay here, or they maybe getting on with the program?
I think we're getting less and less around. They're starting to realize they got to pay the county. It's on the tax bill.
Good. That may less this year.
Yeah, a lot less.
3C, for the resources department, that's Tanisha.
Good afternoon. So through normal workforce movement, we've had quite a bit of, you like that? Yeah. We have quite a bit of recruitment going on over the past few months. We've posted on various job boards, social job boards, ad sites, industry, newsletters, so on and so forth. We posted assessment testing to assist with the screening with potential candidates, and have held interviews for district positions. All of our positions are currently now closed. We recruited for them, and we are moving forward with finalizing a couple of recruits we'll be talking about shortly. Currently, open enrollment is ending as of tomorrow. All staff have had their open enrollment packets for a few weeks now. I appreciate those of you that have turned in your documents, so that's very helpful. I would like to let the board know that over the past couple of years, we've had some really great numbers with our premium rates. This year, coming forward, 2019, we have had less than 1% increase in premium rates, which is almost unheard of for industry trends. So they've been aggregated zero. So that's great. Just wanted you to know that. And I want to thank those that came out for our wellness event this past week. for the MID rodeo. I appreciate those of you that were able to make it, and that our vendors were there. They were excited to be able to make appointments with staff and get some health and wellness information. And we all were out there getting our exercise in.
I'd like to compliment you and your committee for the well-run deal, a wonderful lunch. I felt that the employees were interacting and having a good time at it, and I think you need a hand for doing a good job.
Thank you.
And I want to learn one thing, I can't rope with the dog. I'll take it.
I can eat a sandwich with it, that's all.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
That's very nice.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tasia? Okay.
Okay, item 3B, Operations and Maintenance Department report, and that's Charlie.
All right, myself and Darren spent about 3 days with the United States Bureau of Reclamation on the inspection over the 6-2 lateral and 24-2 to 32-2. My question is, I think that's done every 3 years, and now they're going to be doing that every 6 years. So that gives us a pretty good window to do all the corrections they want us to do during the report. They will be issuing us a complete report sometime in the next couple of weeks, and that hasn't come in yet. So as soon as we get that report, we'll go down the list and start take care of all the recommendations and what they want us to do to try to repair. Most of the stuff was fairly small stuff, some erosion on some of the banks, there's a couple of meter boxes don't have any covers, it wasn't really a whole lot of things that were really, really important that are pressing that we need to get on right away. They were all small items, so we'll be addressing those items as time to get us back the report. Work completed. We are still continuing to do several leaks throughout the system. There's a list here. I don't want to go through the list and bore all you guys with all of it. You can see there with keeping busy doing leaks, continuing. We'll also continue doing our mowing and our grader work, so we're trying to get both graders going out there, but right now we got a couple of big projects we're working on, 17-0. We are also getting that thing completed. In about 5 days, we laid about 1,400 feet of pipe, so we're moving pretty good there. So hopefully we'll have that done probably within the next couple of weeks. So we do have some big boxes that we have to put together and also have our guys build them. So we'll probably be there for an extra 2 more weeks working on those boxes. We're probably about a month away from getting done with that whole project. So hopefully we can get that 17-0 project completed and done. Other than that, one of the big projects that we did have, we spent about 3 weeks working on the hospital line and Tozer Road down to 13.5. I got some pictures there. What happened there is we got a call from the city. Pretty much a sidewalk in the street was undermined, so we went in and removed the sidewalk and removed the city street there, about 8 feet section out into the road. And you can see we pretty much went in there, fixed the leaks in our pipeline. We got all the area cleaned back up. So our guys did a real nice job of putting the concrete sidewalks back into city streets. Even the guy from the city inspector was really impressed with the work we did there, and we're able to finish it.
I want to interject there. I drove by and saw that, and it looks great. And our guys aren't necessarily pouring sidewalks every day or doing finish work out in the residential areas, but they did an excellent job on that and made sure they cleaned up the site, and I think it looks better than the existing concrete work from the contractors.
We're not also asphalt guys, but we did the best we can. And they were really impressed with the work we did there. So we spent like I said, we spent probably a good 2 weeks there working on this project. It was pretty important for us to get it down. Like I said, the city street was undermined, and so was the sidewalk, so we had to close everything down.
The stripes getting straight.
Yeah. So it worked out real well, but that was one of the big projects that we just did, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, and got that done. Like I said, continue burning. We'll do some burning on our canals, and grader work is ongoing. Also, we have, you can see here one of my photos here that we pulled one of our Rubicon gates, and there's about 20 more of these Rubicon gates that we got to pull, but this year we probably won't get to all of them. We're doing retard epoxy coating on some of these gates.
These are the first ones.
Yeah, these are the first ones that were put in 2015. So we'll try to do as many as we can this year. I'm probably predicting maybe we'll do another 4 this year, get them in. We got to pull them, bring them in the shop. We got to pressure wash them. There's a couple of different things, some acid wash we got to do, and some prep material that we got to put on them. So it's a 3-part process that we got to do each one of the gates. So it's kind of time consuming. So we're also trying to. That's the reason why we're pulling them, is we're also trying to do the rails that are in the canal banks itself and the walls, trying to get those coated also. So we'll do as many as we can. Also, one of these other photos we did, some photos that we did of island track. We pulled a pump on island track and also the airport pump. There's two different pumps that we pulled out that were definitely in need of repairs. So we got those pumps now at Cal West Pump Company. So they'll be doing the repair work on those two pumps for us, and we'll probably have them out another month and a half or so. We're going to put back in. And we're also redoing electrical panels at island track, those electrical boxes and stuff. All the VFD electrical components on there are really old. And there's no more parts for those. They're so old, so we're also putting up a brand new electrical panel up there and getting those updated. So we'll be able to get parts in the future for those motors. So I think that's about it. Quite a bit going on, so keeping us pretty busy.
Yeah, the rain is slowing down at this point.
And we'll see.
Any questions for Charles?
I have some questions for you. On your project on the 17-0, Charles, are you a little challenged with the equipment out there?
I think we got enough equipment out there. It's just a matter, I've been waiting for the landowners to get done with their processing their nuts and get everything out of the fields. I think that's what we were waiting on, but I think other than that, it's going real well. If we need anything, then we have all the equipment we got to put that in. I think it's going fairly well. Yeah, I don't see us being short any equipment on that project at this point. I do have some funds in there if we need to rent anything, we can do that, but I think it's going real well.
Yeah,
I think we're moving pretty fast.
Yeah, the big backhoe is having to do double duty, some digging and then some filling.
Yeah, I do got some money in the budget for next year for another backhoe, so that's something that we are working on. So hopefully the board will give me approval next year to get some of this other people.
And a packing, some type of, I don't know, it might be better if we have a mechanical packer instead of that hand.
The hand whackers?
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty important that we also, whack beside the pipe and get it put in really good. There's some sandy material out there, so it is time consuming to get the right moisture in the ground and things like that. But I think it's going fairly well. It's going fairly well. Hopefully we can get that finished up pretty quick. Like I said, the putting in the pipeline, I say another 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, but the complete project probably another month we're looking at. So.
Anybody else?
Okay, item 4, general manager's report, update on activities.
A few items to update you on. Number one, for our last meeting, as the Bureau tends to like to do, they wait until the Madera account shuts off, then they make their final declaration for the year. So they did declare an additional 3% class 1 available to MID, and unfortunately, that's not enough, obviously, to fire our system and run, so that was available to us and we'll carry that over for next year. So that's, we'll give us a head start, I guess, on our water supplies, looking at it on a positive note. As you are aware, MID is part of the peer review group for the Gunner Ranch West groundwater plan that they're required to prepare and have recently submitted as a draft for the peer review group's review. We did submit as part of a joint letter between Madera County Farm Bureau, MID, and Groundwater Ford Water District, a letter to the county regarding that groundwater plan. In general, I should mention the other members are Root Creek Water District and Chapchilla Water District. Root Creek Water District did already submit a letter to the county through their review. Our joint letter that we have with Madera County Farm Bureau and Groundwater Ford MID acknowledges that letter and that we, in general, agree with it. We did not provide detailed analysis of their calculations, but what we did want to mention is that they should utilize the most accurate and the most recent available information to them. There's been a lot of work done recently as part of Sigma, basin-wide. So we would like for that to be considered in the groundwater, in their groundwater management, or groundwater plan, should say. So that is the general content of the letter. It also mentions that we disagree with Chapchilla Water District's response to the county, where they said that it looked good. So we did acknowledge that we do not agree with Chapchilla Water District's opinion. So that is the other component of the letter, and that it shall be weighted, should be weighted properly, being that Chapchilla Water District is not under their substation. So that was submitted, and I want to thank Farm Bureau and Groundwater Ford for working with MID to develop that letter and cooperating with us to get that submitted, and hopefully the county will consider that in their process of approving the ground or not approving the groundwater plan. I do want to thank Gina and Owen for representing the district very well at two recent events. On September 4th, Gina actually presented to the San Joaquin College of Law. So she has her honorary JJ degree maybe. She's been asked to present to one of the law classes there, I believe it was the water law class. Always does a great job representing this. And if that wasn't enough, she then presented to the United Nations on water, as they were on their tour of California water recently, so she did a presentation for them on September 7th. So I want to thank her for that, and we received a lot of confidence from those presentations that we typically do. So you were very well represented with those two events.
I can't tell you what it's about.
Yes. That's good clearance to give you more information. I want to thank Charles for the Bureau Reclamations and inspection that occurred back in September 24th and 27th. I did get a preliminary report from them with all positive comments verbally that they were happy to see the condition of the Bureau facility, which they inspected and only noted some minor erosion issues, typical maintenance activities that are always going to be there. So they wanted to compliment you and your staff for the work and taking the time to drive them around and tour all the facilities. Thank you for that. There's an important event coming up from Bryant Water Authority. A lot of you in this room were there at the last one. They call it Eggs and Issues. The CEO presents on all of the hot topics that Bryant Water Authority is attending. If you'd like to attend that, it's on October 30th in the morning. I'm not sure the start time is usually around 7:30.
7:39.
We recently sent that out through an email blast, and so you can RSVP through Andrea, or if you have additional questions or like to attend that, please contact Andrea. She'll get you lined up and get you on the list. Breakfast is provided. So we did have a nice little breakfast for you, and I think it's very, very worthy of your time to go see what's going on, big picture wise on water supply within the Bryant division and San Joaquin Valley wide and statewide for that matter.
And there is limited seating and it is filling up, so if you're interested in RSVP.
They do these events throughout the valley, and I think they've already had one line and it's filled up. So they have been well attended. They were very useful last year when they did these, and so I expect them to fill up. If you're interested, I recommend your attendance for that. Very educational. We have started a tradition for early fall of doing a breakfast with bosses where management staff prepares breakfast for our staff. So we're going to be doing that again this year. It's going to be on Tuesday. Friday, November 16th, which is a Friday, right? We typically get some board members there to help out too, and I think it should show support for ending another water season and the efforts our staff have made to have lost the breakfast for. So that's always a nice event. If you have time, some time, we appreciate your involvement in that activity. Prior meetings, we've had discussions about the de-annexation of a portion of MID to Wood Creek Water District. That has gone through the APCO process, is now in the Bureau Reclamation for final approval, and then of course we go back to APCO for their ultimate detachment from MID and then moving into Wood Creek Water District. So that's still underway, and it's in the Bureau's hands. We look forward to that being done and checked off for them. Gina has been asked to participate in the TAC for the grant. So the Technical Advisory Committee for the Groundwater Assessment Tool, some of you may have been here, was presented on the Groundwater Assessment Tool, which is a partnership between MID and Madera Irrigation District to develop a tool to optimize groundwater recharge efforts through on-farm recharge dedicated basins. It's a really great tool that we're starting to push out now and customize for a number of different water agencies. MID is still involved, and on the technical side, they've asked for Gina to participate in that, to provide guidance as they customize that tool and program moving forward. They're now offering it to agencies for a fee. MID, luckily we get to, since we're part of the beta testing and development, they've developed a tool for us, custom, so we've been utilizing that for our engineering partner as we look towards these projects to satisfy signal. So that's good, and we'll stay involved with that. I think it's a great tool, and that's to be part of.
Yeah, and that, going back to the GSA presentation earlier, when we're looking at projects and programs to move forward, that tool will be critical for us to decide, where to locate projects, where to do on-farm recharge and such. So it is a very useful tool for MID.
On Temperance Flat, as you know, there was an MOU with MID. It was part of the Temperance Flat where we looked at the overall modeling numbers, really taking a extremely high level look to see if the project would make sense mentioned at the last board meeting, we completed the modeling effort, and all of those are being compiled to the MLU group. It's still moving on the technical side of that. What has changed recently is there is now a JPA, Joint Powers Authority, that is being formed. Two members there yet. Well, that's effectuated as of Bryant and the exchange contractors signing the document. So now it is a JPA. Yeah, well, I don't know if the actual signature of the board has approved it. So there is a JPA being formed which will represent and take the place of the infrastructure authority related to their involvement in Texas Flat. So that's a document that's going to evolve over time, but it will ultimately become a JPA that will take the lead on analyzing and including the feasibility of the Texas Flat project, which Bryant Water Authority and currently the exchange contractors are part of, and are going to continue to develop over the next year to hopefully form a new agency that will take control of implementing or not that project. So that's a culmination of most water agencies in the Bryant and currently the exchange contractors that will do most of their penalty out. Anything else to add on that? Elected volunteers on that? Threads or something. So the Water Infrastructure Authority is transitioning to less involvement in the Texas Flat and will hand off the last one process to the legal policy over time. They're going to then focus on other topics. My understanding is, for example, watershed management, which we heard yesterday, which we're still. So that's still going on, and I think in a positive way. Just as a reminder, there is a Madera County Water Power Authority meeting tomorrow at the Chelsea Water District. In Chelsea Water District's office. Next board meeting, Andrea Wright will be doing oaths of office for David Ryan. So congratulations on that. And finally, I will be on vacation next week. Sure. Am I going to do that? Pretty sure.
I'll believe it when you're
Although I think I typically end up back here before that. Vacation ends. That's all I had. Any questions? Questions, comments? Yes. Cool.
I'll start with a comment. On the Better Ranch letter, the farmer will be submitting an additional letter with regards to the project, because there were some specific things that we wanted to call out as it aligned to our settlement agreement. So that will be submitted on behalf of the Farm Bureau, and that was discussed with Dina and Tommy when we drew up that letter. But I just wanted you guys to know that. On the Temperance Flat JPA, who will be governing that? And
It's its own agency. Yeah. So it will depend on how the JPA language is, it will have its own voting member or its own director that will be part of that.
okay, and so do we have a timeline as to when the current JPA is no more? Because I know there's a meeting this Friday.
The Water Infrastructure Authority is to remain, this new JPA will focus specifically on that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And they're considering how to transition the top one efforts over to the new JPA. I don't know the details of where that is, but I know that's being discussed.
Okay. And then, question on other activities that you reported on last month, and maybe it's out of line me asking it now, but I know last month you mentioned the meeting with the recommendations, and there's supposed to be a follow-up meeting. The one that, yeah, so it was supposed to be Thursday, and they got canceled. Does anybody know, like, roughly when that's going to be rescheduled for?
I have not heard. I'll make sure you're aware of it when it is.
Okay.
Canceling. No, I mean, it was canceled really.
I apologize.
Sorry.
That's happened, yeah.
It's an iPhone.
It's an iPhone issue, yeah.
You're cracking.
I
Yeah, my God, you need to get a Galaxy. I've never done that.
Well, now you're going to.
I have an iPhone.
I'm just finding
Yeah, right, we have new business. 5A, discussion and possible action on controller's employment agreement and appointment of treasurer, and that's resolution number 2018-34.
Well, I'd like to introduce each of you to our new candidate select for the position of District Controller, Anthony Forster. Anthony has been with us for a few months on a temporary basis, working with our finance department and doing a great job. But just to share a little bit about Anthony to you, he's been a CPA for over 30 years in various industries, including healthcare, construction, real estate development, agriculture, higher education. Anthony is a native to the Central Valley, and he's currently residing in Madera. He earned his bachelor's and master's degree at Fresno State. Go Dogs! And while they're also a series real estate license and certificate in grant writing. Most recently, Anthony has been an accounting, finance, and budgeting instructor for a local university, and also an algebra high school teacher. Anthony has expressed his gratefulness for the opportunity to be a part of our team, and is looking forward to providing the guidance to the district's finance staff. He believes in our mission, and he is eager to learn the nuances of the water management and challenges it has to offer. I'd like to present our candidate select, Anthony Forrester.
I want to thank Anthony for hitting the ground running. As you all know, the admin department has been pulled in quite a few directions during the time while our controller left us. We have had to provide minimal guidance to Anthony. He's taken our current staff, including Jen, and really hit the ground running. There has never been a concern, even on a basis, as a temp, that things weren't going to be covered, and I think he's raised the bar for the finance department, and we're very excited to have him join the team here at MID. We're very lucky to find him as a temp to fill in while we were going through the recruitment process, and happy to have him join us on a permanent basis, and we look forward to this next phase of finance. And I'm sure I've heard from his staff that they're very excited also about their soon to be 12 a.m. tonight.
We're taking them already.
I'll take this tomorrow.
We're going out tonight.
So thank you for your efforts over this period of time. And
My pleasure.
so I highly encourage a vote of yes.
I move to approve, go ahead. Move to approve resolution 2018-34. Second. First and second. Any questions from the public? Any questions from the board? All board, please.
Yes. Director Lopashi?
Yes.
Director Cousins?
Yes.
Director Davis is absent. Director Jansen?
Yes.
Director Eric?
Yes. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard. You get to meet the other board tomorrow.
I told him he could call her if I said
Okay, I need it. Change gears here. Yeah, sorry. Didn't work. Christina has the clicker.
I'm sorry, I went for
Well, I'm just going to give kind of a brief introduction to the topic, and then Dean is going to take over.
So, 5B, sorry, discussion only on approach to concerns regarding the Fresno River operations protocol and the Fresno River allocation model and competing rights to the waters of the Fresno River.
Yeah, so earlier on the agenda, I explained in the report out that the district had authorized the filing of a petition. And I know there are questions about what that means, what the scope of it is. And,
voted for it.
I'm sorry?
You voted for it.
It was 4-0 with Director Cousins not in attendance.
Brian's not here.
Brian
He was here for Chloe.
Yeah, Brian.
We should have.
And so we did want to at least have dialogue with the public in terms of presenting some of the issues to the public and provide a little bit. If there's questions, we'll obviously do our best to answer them after giving the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it forward to Dina Nolan, who's going to explain some of the technical issues.
Yeah, so I'm going to walk through some of the operational issues related to the Fresno River. The district entered into a Fresno River Operations Protocol in 2011, which dictated the use of what's called the Fresno River Allocation Model, the FRAM. And since 2011, we've experienced a lot, we've learned a lot, and there's a lot of challenges with the way that those were set up, and we're going to kind of walk through some of those things. So the Fresno River in general starts at Hensley Lake, which is and continues all the way up to the west of San Joaquin River. It's divided into reaches, and those reaches are highlighted on the map in the different color blocks. The MID district boundary is on the map also in the red. As you can see, a number of the parcels are actually outside of the MID boundary. So the Fresno River modeling, so again, there's the Fresno River Operations Protocol, which has the acronym the FROP. It requires the use of the Fresno River Allocation Model, which is the FRAM. There's actual multiple models related to the FRAM. There's a cross-demand model for each individual landowner along the Fresno River with riparian and or appropriate rights. That was developed by Cal Poly IPRC. And it's based on annually submitted information by each landowner. That information includes acreage, the cropping patterns, the irrigation types, and diversion capacity. That information is then calculated out for each individual landowner and put into what's called the FRAM, the Fresno River Allocation Model. That model was developed by the Bureau of Reclamation. It takes the crop demand inputs and the diversion capacities, and from that and the inflows related to Hidden Dam, Hensley Lake, it then calculates out the entitlements for each riparian along the Fresno River. Here's just an example. I do want to remind the board and the public that MID does all of these calculations in-house with existing staff, so we don't have any additional funding to do this. We don't have any consultants to be able to assist in this process. So this is a lot of staff time related to this Fresno River process and essentially implementing the crop and the FRAM. So each individual landowner has one of these crop demand models, again based on the inputs provided by each landowner annually. That information that goes into the FRAM, this is just one example spreadsheet of the FRAM that needs all the inputs associated with it. And then there's an example of what the FRAM actually looks like. Again, it's a highly complicated model, and if you can see down here at the bottom, there's an example equation. That entire set of 3 lines is one equation in the spreadsheet. So again, highly complex, a lot of inputs, multiple models, and multiple inputs associated with each one. So again, a large amount of staff time associated with this. So issues with the FROP, again, Operations Protocol and the FRAM that the district has had since 2011, then they can mainly be isolated into procedural issues and then actual conditions versus model conditions related to the river. So procedural, the way that the Operations Protocol is set up is there's timing issues associated with it. The riparian year starts October 1st each year. Information from the landowners isn't due until the end of September. So by the time the district even gets the information from each of these landowners, we're already 3 months into the riparian year. Then that information has to be sifted through and put into these different models. So again, it takes quite a while, it's labor intensive, and we have timing associated with it. There's issues related to storm events versus the Fresno River Operations Protocol. So obviously, if there are storm events and inflows that are occurring in October, November, December, by the time the information is actually gathered from the landowners and put into the model, we are already months delayed related to that. We have had the occurrence frequently of inaccurate submittals by landowners, and so inaccurate and overstated submissions overstated with acreage, inaccurate as far as if it's riparian acreage, if it's appropriative acreage, what's actually being grown out there, what's the actual diversion capacities associated with those. So that creates a lot of issues for the district. We have to attempt to go through those and sort things out. Again, there's timing related to this, and the models run as a whole. So we can't isolate landowners, we can't isolate reaches. All the information has to be put in and run at the same time. So when we have an issue with one, it affects everybody, and it affects the district too. So inaccurate submittals is a big concern for the district. And then lack of timely and complete submittals without clear ramifications. So the Fresno River Operations Protocol really doesn't outline any sort of ramifications for inaccurate submittals, for untimely submittals, for missing deadlines associated with that. And so the district's left in the position of trying to decipher what those are and what those need to be. There's been a recent intensification of riparian land use to the detriment of downstream landowners. So the way that the model works is essentially it goes, from top to bottom. So the most upstream landowner, if the water can be met for the losses and there's a cross demand there, that entitlement is met first, and then it essentially goes down the line. So as people, increase their water use on the land with their crop types and increase their diversion capacity, that affects the downstream landowners. Yet the downstream landowners still feel as if they have a right to some of the water, and it creates issues because the district is in the position of running these models. Metering reporting, as you saw on the prior map, some of the properties are in MID, some are not in MID. A lot of times when this water is running from run of the river, it is outside of our normal irrigation season. We don't necessarily have the staff to be out there reading meters. Our staff is working on other projects at the time, and it's also whose responsibility it really is to meter this and to report this information and to make sure that there's no abuse of the system. And then facility maintenance and management. Again, some of these are located within the district, some are outside of the district. Whose facilities are they? Who's monitoring them? Who's maintaining them and such. So again, these are all issues that have been brought up in this time frame since 2011 when the operations protocols were established. Again, inaccurate and convoluted submittals from landowners. There are some examples. So again, statement of acreages, varying acreages. Again, this information has to be submitted annually, and frequently, the numbers don't align with either previous years or what the district has on file of what the acreages should look like. They come in all different forms and fashions, which makes it difficult for the district to go through and actually try to determine what the appropriate input should be. There's diversion capacity. There's been increases on forms, but there's really no backup, and it's difficult to determine what those diversion capacity should be associated with that. Also, locations of the points of diversion and added points of diversion are all issues that have arose from these submittals. And then the authority to submit and represent. So we frequently get multiple people contacting us on behalf of the same property. And so who really has the authority to represent these properties? Who has the authority to fill out the form? Again, all issues related to the way that the program is currently set up and what the district has to deal with on an annual basis for a number of landowners up and down the Fresno River. And then the other main issue with the Fresno River Operations Protocol and the way that it was structured and the use of a model is actual conditions versus model conditions. So a model is a model. It takes a lot of assumptions and different types of information and puts it into a model and has an output. Well, although the inputs can be accurate, a lot of this relates to timing. And so model can calculate out an entitlement, but when that entitlement actually occurs and the relief is associated with it, for instance, the model has an assumption for losses for each reach of the Fresno River. Well, if it's been a historically dry period of time, if we've been in a drought for a couple years and you put that into the model and you calculate that out, that, you might relieve options that we've looked at over the last few years.
And just briefly, I will say that Fresno River is unique in that, it was built in the 70s, and at that time, after the construction of Hidden Dams, from the dam were never quantified, adjudicated with some very minor exceptions. And ultimately, the prop and the pram came out of an attempt to help resolve the issue. And we now have 7 years of experience with the pram and the prop. And I think what we've ultimately determined, as Dina has mentioned, is that, you know, through that period, we've had dry years, extremely dry years. We've had historically wet years. We've had moderate years. And regardless of the type of year, I think staff's conclusion is ultimately that that despite the earnest attempt to have a resolution, through that type of manner and management of the system, that it's just not working. And I will say that I think the one thing that everybody on the Fresno River, who relies upon the Fresno River, who has an interest on the Fresno River, could agree upon is that they are unhappy with the current circumstances relating to the Fresno River. So ultimately, the district has decided to act to ultimately to achieve a robust final resolution. And I think we understand that it's going to take time. It's going to take interaction with state agencies. It's going to take interaction with all the landowners with rights on the Fresno River. But I think that it is in everybody's best interest to reach a resolution that solidifies everybody's rights to the river and provides everybody with greater certainty. That way they can make the most of their investment-backed expectations on their land. So when we were going through this process, we did have a number of objectives in mind. And as you'll see, most of these relate to not just the burdens on the district, but I think really a need to and a desire to have the system work in a way that's equitable and lawful for the people who actually rely upon the water of the Fresno River. So we looked at how can we increase the certainty regarding the management of the Fresno River, making it clearer what everybody's obligations are. Two, we ultimately want a system of management, regardless of who is managing that in the future, for it to be lawful. And what I mean by lawful is ensuring that whatever comes out of this process is consistent with California water law and the priority of everybody's water rights on the system. And so ultimately the only way to do that in a way that's fair and respects historic users on the Fresno River, regardless of who they are, is to bring it to a decision of the state board. Obviously Dina's spoken quite a bit on the operational burden of district staff. And so having a system that is a little bit clearer and easier to manage will help everybody. Obviously over the last 7 years, I think we've had firsthand experience with the fact that nobody is really happy with the way the river's being managed. And so having this adjudicated once and for all with the state board, I think our objective is to reduce potential disputes. Not just, and I think our focus is less on the district, but also reducing disputes between landowners. Because if an upstream landowner, for example, uses more than the upstream landowner's lawful share of the water, that will have an adverse impact on downstream landowners who have relied upon the waters of the Fresno River for decades upon decades. In addition, and I think this flows very well into the fifth point, which is ensuring that water rights are established and proven to the satisfaction of the state board. And ultimately, we don't view ourselves as the entity that adjudicates that. That's not our jurisdiction. It's not our job. That's for the state board to determine. And really, the only way, because we're not water cops, ultimately to get to that is to have a third party with jurisdiction make those determinations. Finally, I know there is concern about newly developed lands increasing their water usage beyond what the historic usage of those lands were. That obviously, as I mentioned previously, could have an adverse impact on people who have used the Fresno River for a century or more. And so, that obviously is something that the board can take into consideration when making the final determination. Ultimately, it's their call in terms of how they want to resolve that issue. Obviously, the district has its own water rights, and so, again, we think that having this resolved by a third party would be the most equitable and fair for everybody on the system. Finally, I think everybody within the basin, everybody within the district, all the landowners along the Fresno River have an interest in ensuring that the waters of the Fresno River are utilized and the benefit of those waters is maximized. So obviously that's a very important objective for us. Now, obviously this is not necessarily a decision that the district takes lightly. Adjudications are not really something that happens every day. They're also something that take years to resolve when they wind through the process. We're cognizant of that, but because of that time, because of the burden, not just to the district, but to the landowners who want to participate in those types of proceedings, we really did view this as an option of last resort. So we looked at various options that the district had short of pursuing an adjudication. And so, ultimately though, most of these pathways resulted in, the district eventually hitting a wall. So annual settlements, for example, for several years after the Franklin crop were implemented, the district was successfully able to enter into agreements with landowners to resolve their concerns. However, that ultimately fell through, and the district was unable to do that, partly because there were some landowners who wanted to leverage their rights to get a source of water that they could market on the open market, which is not something that the state board it would allow, nor is it something that's in the best interest of the basin. Long-term agreements for similar reasons were not achievable. The district looked at strict adherence to the protocols, which is what we're currently doing, but obviously we found that to be infeasible and unworkable. Because ultimately nobody is happy under that circumstance. Pass-through flows, which is very similar to the protocols, it is obviously not optimal for very similar reasons. It's also wasteful because the water could be used in a way that's much more efficient that provides benefits to a greater number of people. The Bureau obviously is not really in a position to directly manage the Fresno River, nor would that achieve the objectives, I think, and for reasons very similar to number 3. We also looked at modifications to the license, but those didn't achieve the district's objectives, nor did the district believe that would create a robust solution for the long term for the landowners along the Fresno River. So ultimately, the two objectives the district was left, or the two options the district was left with, were either a court or statutory adjudication. So the way the process would work is the state board would perform an investigation, and it would be an administrative proceeding by the board to determine all rights to the water of the stream system here in the Fresno River. The state board itself would provide notice to anybody who has a potential claim on the Fresno River. They cast, we understand, a very, very wide net, and so they go back to patents. And the reason why it's comprehensive is because they do what we understand to be a very thorough investigation. So there is an opportunity for everybody to be heard. The state board would perform an investigation. questions for them to hear those in a public proceeding. And those would eventually be resolved by the board. So there would be several opportunities for landowners with interest in the waters of the Fresno River to participate in those proceedings. And in particular, if they disagree with the ultimate findings of the board. Ultimately, if a landowner doesn't have any issue with the determination that the board's made, there's no need to participate unless they want to for other reasons. Ultimately, the state board is authorized to quantify existing rights, including the riparian rights, and also do equity when it comes to unexercised riparian rights or development of additional rights. So we believed that based on all the factors, based on the disputes that have arisen today, that a statutory adjudication is ultimately the best way to reach a resolution of the rights to the waters of the Fresno River in a way that is fair, in a way that's equitable, in a way that takes all the competing interests into consideration, and ultimately result in a conclusion that's legally binding. I think the district understands that the process is not necessarily a quick process. The district also understands that it's not an inexpensive process, both for the district as well as people who want to participate in the process. But ultimately, the district determined that this was the most reliable option for a final comprehensive determination of the rights on the system. So that is ultimately why the district is proceeding down this pathway. Obviously, we wanted to have this session. It is a little bit unusual to have an open session after somebody, after a public agency makes a determination to initiate a legal proceeding. But because obviously this is an issue that affects a lot of people, and because the district views itself as somewhat neutral in this process, there are a lot of downstream landowners who may have disputes amongst themselves. But that this was a process where it was important to alert the public to the fact that we were engaging in this process, to answer any questions that we can, obviously within our ability to do so today, and to at least alert the public in terms of what's happening, and the fact that landowners who have an interest will have the opportunity to participate in proceedings over the next several years relating to this issue.
Who operates the river in the next several years?
I'm sorry?
Who operates the river in the next several years?
So that's actually something we're going to be discussing next. For the meantime, the district will continue to be operating the river as it has over the past several years, and that will be in accordance with the outputs of the FRAM, and that's ultimately what. We've run that by the state board, and the state board has agreed that that's an acceptable interim solution, and but ultimately we don't really see an alternative that would be workable other than simply proceeding as best as we can with these two documents, however flawed they might be.
You guys and ties are going to make a lot of money.
Yes, Doug.
Hi, John. A couple of questions. It appears as though the district has made revisions to the 2011 version of the FRAM and perhaps the operational model as well. Do you agree?
What the district does, the district has a model. The model itself has not been modified. The way the model is structured is something that was approved by the state board back in 2011 after interfacing with a lot of people back before my time. So the district has not changed the model itself. However, the model is dynamic, and so depending on what everybody's crop demands are, depending on what the riparian acreage is that people submit, depending on the flows of the river in any particular year, the district is required, not necessarily in real time, but very close to real time, to update that model. And so throughout the water season, the inputs to the model will change, and that will ultimately determine under the model, what people's allocations are, what needs to ultimately be released.
I understand that perhaps the structure of the model hasn't changed, but the values, for example, as we've discussed a number of times in terms of the riparian acreage attributed to various claimants has been changed. So my question is, what will be the effect, if any, of these 2011 proceedings that a number of us went through for a number of years before finally the state board issued a report allowing the Bureau of Reclamation to store some water?
Yeah. So the riparian acreage in 2011 was not necessarily fixed, and because of that, what that has done is it has created a system in where the district receives crop water information that includes an estimation of what people's riparian acreage is, and so that in some cases does not appear to be consistent with the chain of title or consistent with our understanding of what folks post-1914 appropriate rights may be. And so the district has been operating the model in the best way that it can, and including inputs that the district, based on facts, based on the best information the district has available. And in those instances where the district does not believe that the facts on the ground support what has been provided by the riparian landowner, the district in some instances has asked the landowner to provide further information to support the facts underlying their application. So that may be what you're referring to. But the district ultimately doesn't view itself as the watercock, and it understands that there may be disputes regarding the quantity of riparian acreage and also the order in which people receive water. So whether riparians get water before post-1914 appropriated users. Ultimately, that's something that the district believes can be resolved through the state board in a new proceeding, and the state board understands that there are problems with what happened in 2011, and I think that there's motivation on all sides to at least help resolve it.
So basically, in some sense, the district is saying, we want out of the middle of this and deciding who gets what, or changing what was decided about who gets what, and let the state board do that.
There are some instances where the state board has already made determinations in terms of what riparian acreage is, and that's particularly true west of Road 9. But everybody east of Road 9 has never been subject to that type of determination. So for the folks east of Road 9, ultimately the board will be stepping in to make determinations about what truly the riparian acreage is. The district obviously has had dialogue with some landowners and their representatives, and I think you and I have had discussions where the district doesn't understand how a riparian acreage was funded. And so because there, I think, is a good faith dispute there, that dispute we're essentially turning over to the board to ultimately render a decision. And so whatever the board says, obviously at the end of this process will be the law. And I think everybody's goal is to obviously not have to do this once, to do it right, to do it in a way that is going to be fair as it can be to everybody based on what the facts are, and when the process is done, that we'll have something that we can at least live with.
Well, and I can understand, frankly, because the district has rights, so it's sort of like the referee is also the starting quarterback on the other team. You mentioned agreements that MID has had with landowners. And this may not be the time and place, but I'd be curious to know what those agreements are and whether or not they're going to be honored in the future. And have to believe that there are some folks here who have that same question.
Yeah, so for example, in 2013 and 2014, there were 1 year, I'm sorry, 12 and 13, there were 1 year agreements between the district and the water users at Road 9. So for example, your clients had a 1 year agreement with the district. So that's something that we can have, I can kind of refresh you on some of those because I know it's been several years. But there were some instances where the district did have some agreements with downstream landowners to help satisfy their water rights and to provide and for that short period of time. So those were 1 year agreements.
Seems to me on the presentation, though, you mentioned long-term agreements.
Oh, yeah, so there are no long-term agreements. I mean, look, I think in an ideal world, everyone with claimed water rights and the district could all enter into an agreement and say, this is how much riparian acreage we have, this is how we're going to get our water, this is when we're going to get our water. But in order to do that, we would need 40-something people to all agree around the table that this is how the world is going to look. And that's the only way that we could really get a robust, legally defensible set of long-term agreements. Because, for example, the district can enter into a long-term agreement to kind of resolve the long-term rights between the district and your clients' lands, right? Because if we do that without the assent of everybody else on the stream, I guarantee you, all the other people on the stream would say, hey, wait a second, you gave Doug's clients way too much water. And so that's inequitable. We're going to challenge that agreement. So we couldn't. So the reason why the long-term agreements, and I probably didn't explain this very well, but the reason why the long-term agreements is infeasible is under the current circumstances, I just don't think there's any feasible way to get 40 people sitting around the table with an issue as contentious as this and with the facts on the ground being as clear as these are, for everybody to sit around and enter into long-term agreements. Again, in a perfect world, I mean, it would be great to get everyone to agree and then to wrap it all up in a package for the board to approve.
So that referenced future long-term agreements, and you don't think the board has any long-term agreements with any of the rights?
That is accurate. So, question?
My name is Kevin Herman. Riparian water user, first class, subordinate, outside water purchase. And I don't want to I think we've got a mutually beneficial relationship with MID for a long time now. And we've always worked well together. And never been speed bumps along the way, you bet. But whenever there's a speed bump, someone picks up the phone and calls me and says, hey, Kevin, you got a problem with this or with that. And I want to know, why the hell did we change the way you do business as it relates to this? Why did you not have meetings with us in advance to talk about the consequences? Why did you not offer us the chance for all 40 of us to sit down? You're just assuming you couldn't do it. Why did you vote before we even got public input?
Yeah, and Kevin, I think you're raising a good point, and this is one where I'd like you to blame the attorney, to be honest, and so because really that's something that is really an issue with the kind of nature of this proceeding. I will say that the people who the district has had dialogue with are the people who have been least happy with the system and who have who have positions regarding the amount of riparian acreage, etc., that the district believes don't align with the facts. So it really, unfortunately, because of the nature of this proceeding, isn't the type of thing, unlike Sigma outreach, GSA outreach, a lot of other issues, big projects with the that the district is undertaking. I think the district has endeavored to do that in most cases, at least since this group has been here. This issue, similar to the filing of a complaint, doesn't lend itself to that process, and I am perfectly willing to take the heat for that.
Well, unfortunately, we didn't elect you to run the issue. We elected these gentlemen here.
I understand.
And I hold each and every one of you accountable for letting him run the insane asylum. You guys need to step up. You need to be talking to us and not doing things in the vacuum.
We are not
in a vacuum by any
When you guys, when Dave and you were on the Frozen River Committee, I offered, hey, if there's a problem, talk to me. Have you guys ever talked to me?
Mark,
No.
can I say something? Because I have been intimately involved in this process for the last 7 years. And unfortunately, the way that the whole system works is we can't isolate this landowner and that landowner and such because of the way, because of the flow of water and the reaches and such. So without coming to agreement and essentially starting at the most downstream landowner and working our way up, without reaching agreement with that final downstream landowner, the district can't get resolution from the remainder of the system just because of the way it works. So we have, and Mark, we've had many.
Well, Don, wait a minute.
We've had many,
Don't go there, because we've had discussions, but it's been a long time because of one complaint, and then you wouldn't talk to us. Then you put a nasty grammar about the OES grant that you might stop because of this action, which is going to affect everybody in Red Top, but we have a subsidence problem. And now, we had a meeting with you after a month of waiting while you guys were gone to depositions or whatever, to have a little 1-hour meeting, and then we're trying to get our other landowners together for another meeting, and then this pops up. And so you have a state agency, a water district, willing to work with you, to work with the downstream riparians, to figure out a way to work around this problem. And it's like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
And why so quick?
So it's
You got water in 2011, in 2017, and 2018, 3 years since 2011. We didn't even take in the water in 2011. So we're still learning the system too. I know Washington's not happy with me, but that's okay. We agree to disagree.
Yeah.
But again, what Kevin is saying is, with Sigma, in the post-Sigma world, we have to work together. And you have to, maybe you don't feel this way, but as a GSA, work with the other GSAs to be successful in your sub-basin. And you're not doing that.
Okay,
You're going to the lawyer part.
We're talking about riparian subdivision right now, and the district has it hasn't been a short period of time. It has been over 7 years, and that was after the 2011 discussion. So it's been 7 years, and we have attempted to find every solution possible. We've attempted to have settlement discussions. We've attempted to do replacement supplies. We've talked to the Bureau about management. We've talked to the state board and such. We do have 2 complaints filed against MID currently with the state board related to this system. Okay, the state board, and we've been having discussions. However, the state board has told us they are requiring action by the district and they gave us essentially a deadline, and it was October of this year. So we have been working very hard. Our board has been working very hard to look at all of the options related to it and to try to meet the deadline of the state board. And this was the result. And in honesty, it seems like the best result for all parties involved. Everybody gets final resolution. And it's a state board, an independent third party, who gets to make these decisions. It's not MID negotiating one-on-one with 40 different landowners. It's the state board who's going to be working and analyzing on that. And our board is taking that into consideration in making these decisions.
So you're asking us to trust the state board instead of our fellow farmers?
Well, we haven't been able to find resolution in the last 7+ years. So,
A couple other questions.
and we have an ultimatum.
A couple other questions. You indicated earlier that the financial burden to do flow meters and do the applications. What's the budget that the MID has in legal costs to help resolve this? Do you have a budget number?
Yeah, so the cost would be less legal, honestly, than it would be the state board investigative costs, which would be shared by everybody who participates in the proceeding.
What was some of these numbers?
1 million. 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 1 milli The state board has not given us what the number is for.
So the board voted on doing this without knowing the economic consequences of it, is that what you're telling me?
I can't talk to you about what was discussed in closed session with respect to.
You can't tell me what the budget amount is?
Not with respect to what was discussed in closed session.
Okay. Has any other districts ever done this? I suspect not. And why, if it's such a good idea, why aren't other folks doing it?
Yeah, so this was, very common in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And for reasons that we don't quite understand, this was never pursued with the Fresno River after the construction of it. So if you look at most of the other, significant streams in the state where they have issues similar to this, those were resolved many decades ago. Because the Fresno River, during that time frame, didn't go through a similar process. That's one of the reasons why we continue to have these disputes. So is it something that happens recently, frequently? No, but I can tell you that there was recently a court adjudication that was filed, I think it was a couple weeks ago.
Now, mention of,
Well, really quick, the other thing that makes Madera Irrigation District unique in this situation is Madera Irrigation District has its own pre-1914 water rights related to this, which many other districts don't hold.
last question is, you mentioned approximately 40 folks that are riparian water users. And I would venture to guess that virtually every one of those water users is also an MID member as well. And it's really disheartening to see the irrigation district throwing its own members under the bus. Because with the uncertainty and the economic consequences that you're going to be putting on our shoulders now, that's not why we elected you guys.
No, but you have to look at the other side of that is the fact that we have no way of correcting what we're doing. If we try to do anything to one, as you heard before, then it throws somebody else or we get threatened with a lawsuit against the individual. I've been through, I don't know how many meetings where the group cannot get along and discuss how it's going to work. And we can't do both sides because if we decide to go and choose without having the state board involved, then it comes back to us, well, you're looking out for yourself. I got on this board because I believe that everybody has to be treated equal. But you have to realize, we have the irrigation district that's been in operation for almost 100 years that our forefathers had put in place. We have a set of rules there. We have no rules here. If we just let it go, it's back to run the road through the river every year, and how does that help us?
You didn't give us a chance, though, to try to come up with a plan. I mean, rescind your vote, give us 90 days, circle the wagons, let us all sit down and try to figure out a solution. You've never done that collectively with us. That's what I'm asking. You've never done it, and you owe that to us.
Carl? Kevin, I partly understand where you are, but I came on the board quite a few years ago, and that was one of the first things that was talked about was a lawsuit over the Fresno River that was filed against us, and it probably shouldn't have been filed against us, but we won't get into those details. I've sat in the meetings over the last 20 years with multiple landowners that have changed. Some of the landowners maybe that you now represent own the land up front. And we basically never could get anyone to agree on, it was always one or two people didn't agree with how it was being done. And Mark, I know you want to put your hand up, but some of you...
I'm just wondering when I had a meeting with you, Carl.
I never met with you, Mark.
Okay.
But I met with the previous owners of your land.
With Grover?
And
Nobody ever met with Grover.
I don't know, they're representatives. I've met with representatives for Triangle T. I'm not, the names of those people I don't remember, but I've been in many meetings with people up and down in this room with...
Well, I've been there since 2010.
Well, and I've been here since 2000.
I know, but I haven't seen you since 2010 in a meeting like that. I haven't seen Jim, I haven't seen Dave, I
You have seen me.
I've seen you not in a meeting about the Fresno water.
Oh, yes.
Oh, we have.
And in the end,
Okay, so
All right.
Yeah, and so part of the, part of the benefit of this, I mean, this isn't, part of the benefit of this process is for the people who have been relying upon this river and who truly have riparian rights, for their rights ultimately to be solidified. And what this process will do is it will give those people long-term certainty. That's ultimately our objective. So if for landowners who are long-term users, who don't have anything to worry about with respect to their riparian boundaries, who have been putting their lands at reasonable beneficial use for many, many decades, my sense is that the state board will look differently upon people like that than people who claim riparian rights, but either haven't exercised them historically or alternatively who are exaggerating their riparian rights. So, yes.
My name is Melanie Aldridge. I'm here on behalf of Kevin Herman Ranches. I also would ask the board to wait. With Sigma, before Sigma, we had groundwater management plans and we all kind of did our own thing and things kept getting worse. Then once we had the hammer of Sigma with the probationary from DWR, all of a sudden everyone's coming to the table in ways that we probably never thought that we would. I think if you got those 40 people into the room and said, we don't want to, but the only way we know out of this is to file an adjudication, which is known as the nuclear option in our world. And before we take the nuclear option, we want to give you a chance for everyone to sit down and figure this out. Because as a practical matter, the landowners are going to be bearing the district's costs as landowners paying assessments, and they will also be bearing their own costs. And they should be told that so that they know up front. And then let's see how well we get along and negotiate and to come to some sort of framework with that threat hanging over their head, just like the only reason we've gotten this far on Sigma is because no one wants the DWR to come in and take over the basin.
Well, the district probably won't even act on the board probably would not even act on a petition for over 90 days.
When do you anticipate filing?
As soon as possible. So even after the filing, though, the board wouldn't act on the petition. The State Water Resources Control Board likely would not act on the petition for well over 90 days. So obviously, if all 40 people on the river came together with something that everyone could live with, so be it. But I think that time frame is going to be there no matter what. In addition, the state board has asked us to take action in a way that's different from the way to help move past the problems that they see with the FRAP and the FROM, or the FRAM and the FROP, and also to do something proactive because of these complaints that have been filed. So this is a way for us to meet the board's demands, the state board's demands, but ultimately it won't be likely until the early part of next year if the board even takes action to accept or deny the petition.
Is the district willing to facilitate? You have the addresses of all these people. Is the district willing to facilitate the type of meeting if the landowners were willing to get together during that 90-day period?
I think that's something we can circle back on, but ultimately that's something that's not a decision for me to make. But
I'm not sure that we do have everybody either, because we don't know. That's why part of the reason we state is
right. But if Dina's complaints, and I get it, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, and that's just the way it is in water generally, I think. But I think if to me, and I'm very much into dollars and cents, and let's get to the bottom line. I'm a transactional lawyer, and my clients are always at the bottom line. And to me, it seems like a relatively small investment of time and energy into something that would save the district and all of its landowners a ton of money if some sort of framework could be worked out, knowing that if they don't, there's the nuclear option. I think the added, just like we all are different with Sigma, let's be honest, we're different now with Sigma than we would have been under, AB 3030 and some of the other plans. I think if now, in this era of transparency that we just found out today about or yesterday when the agenda went through, I think that the attitude might be different if they know, okay, now I really need to find a way to make this work because I'm weighing the practicality of getting this done versus years of engineering and hearings and the minutia that drags on at these adjudications, and the uncertainty that's going to impact your financing, your lending, buying, selling. How do you know how much water you have? I'll know in 8 years when the adjudication's over. Make me an offer. So me as a business lawyer, I hate all the uncertainty that it throws all the landowners in for that same reason. And if all of that were laid out to them and say, look, we're tired of being the cop. We didn't vote to be the cop. We don't want to be the cop. We don't want to spend money doing this model. It doesn't work anyway, and you guys don't give us the information, so here's where we're at. And lay it out to the landowners that are there and say, we're sorry, but this is the only thing we can think of. So this is our last chance to try something.
Okay, on that, so we lay it all out, the people we know come in and decide, okay, well, we're going to work it out. Somebody from the outside that has a water right that has not been proven or staked yet shows up and files suit. Now what happens? We're in the same boat. Now we're having to spend, we're going to spend
money. But for
money.
years, we didn't have to spend that money.
So Melanie, so one of the things with certainty that the district would like to get is we are now, in light of Sigma and such, we are now having people come in claiming they have riparian rights. These are not people who have previously been identified on the Fresno River as riparian rights. And again, if we go with the system as the way it stands today, everybody who comes in upstream of any of the existing riparians, that is then essentially, as the system works, they will be able to divert before the next person in line. And so MID is still, we're getting people coming in, we're getting people questioning about riparian rights and different things. We're getting binders, or people submitted binders that are this thick that the district is then required to go through and attempt to assess whether or not there's rights associated with those and such. So part of the reason for this process and the statutory adjudication as opposed to a court adjudication is that it would be comprehensive. And so it would also lock in the rights of all of those who we know are riparian as they sit here today. And essentially would set it in stone so others at a later date can't come in and claim riparian rights upstream of you.
Personally, that's the way I haven't spoken yet. That's the way I look at this. First of all, the prop and the fram were poorly constructed documents that are unworkable, number one. And we've tried. Since I've been here, it's a problem every year, so you just go run in the river. That's no way to manage water, number one. Number two, if I'm a riparian, you're talking about uncertainty. That's what you got now. You have uncertainty now. Because anybody that walks in the door and says, hey, I'm a riparian, to me, this gives you certainty. If you're a riparian, you get it etched in stone and they can't take it away from you. So I was looking at this completely the opposite direction. I'm looking at it that it solidifies your right as a riparian that somebody from the outside can't come in and usurp it.
Not if you're a riparian who hasn't been using your water. You've now stripped the riparian effectively because of the lower priority for unused riparian rights. So some riparian,
all the lands within our system are acknowledged and are included in the FRAM. And so just to give you a visual, everything without color blocking up there, the riparians that MID has identified and are part of the FRAM are the ones in the color blocking. So you can see the Fresno River from Hidden Dam, Hensley Lake, all the way out to the San Joaquin and the areas that aren't. So that's just something to be aware of. Those are the reaches and the lands that have been identified and are currently being included in the Fresno River model.
Right, and for downstream riparian landowners, I think that just to follow up on what Director Fauci said, there, at least, if this were me in my land, I would see some benefit in this, because having new riparian landowners come online, having people assert riparian rights, having people convert their riparian lands from a low-intensity use to a high-intensity use would impact people who have been relying upon the river for decades upon decades. And so without going through this type of adjudication, the district is not the person who makes that determination. We don't have the jurisdiction to do that.
Right.
The only way the downstream riparians can have their rights solidified and to have some certainty that in the future upstream landowners, with or without riparian rights, won't take those water rights away, that people downstream have made investment-backed expectations on, would be to get that certainty from the state board, because it's ultimately their decision to make.
Comment to Mr. Kinsey. I understand the importance of being clear, concise as to who's got what's what, and whatnot. I understand that part of it. However, historically, what comes out of the state water board has not been beneficial to agriculture. I mean, across the board. So you mentioned earlier that in this adjudication process, the state water board is going to cast this wide net to anybody that may be impacted. I think at a county level, I see it as cast that net now as the MID board and talk to those people as they're asking and saying, let's get in the room and have the conversations, right? At the end of the day, when you have parties in dispute, and I'm familiar with the legal world, when you have parties in dispute, you try to handicap for those that are trying to continue their working relationships. You try to do everything you can before you have to go to the last ultimatum, right? I mean, the last thing anybody wants to do is go to a jury trial on anything. So why not at least cast that net and have the conversations and see what comes of it? Because it's possible. I mean, like Ms. Aldridge said, now that Sigma has come to the table, people's perspectives and the way that they're handling things is slightly different than what it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. You can't rely on the state water board. I mean, I get it, because I think it is important. It's very important that everybody knows what their right is. But we've seen it time and time again. We've seen it repeatedly this year. The decisions made by the state water board have been very negative to agriculture. And I don't see this being beneficial in any way to what we've got going on here.
And this is a little bit different of a unit than the people who I think you and I understand the level of mistrust. I truly do. And so I hope you understand that in evaluating those objectives, the reason, I mean, I did mean it when I said that the district evaluated all plausible options before it ultimately got to this point. And so the district has, and obviously, this also predates my time, but the district has reached out to and had numerous discussions with the landowners where there are disputes about what their riparian acreage is, where there are disputes about intensification of land use, where there are disputes about whether or not they're getting their full riparian entitlement. And what we've seen is frankly, a situation where I have a lot of consternation as to whether or not that process would actually work, because we really made it go at it for a very long time.
And just be aware that regardless, fortunately or unfortunately, the state board's involved. Sure. It's been filed against the district.
But to that note, Dina, the complaints that have been filed
to the state water board against the district, and the state water board asking for action, is it specific to those two cases? I mean, you would think that the state water board is saying, hey, here's your problem with these two situations, figure out how to address it, because you don't have other complaints. I mean, you may now, but.
Well, since the complaint has been filed, the state board has been contacted by other riparians on the Fresno River system. And the state board is looking for a comprehensive solution to the Fresno River. They're not looking at isolated fixes for this one period of time.
Yeah, this is not something the state board is interested in isolating to one particular landowner. One particular landowner may have filed the complaint, but they also opened up the Pandora's box.
The state water board also wants you guys to figure it out at a local level, so why not at least throw that net out there and have at least one conversation is all I'm saying, because clearly there's growers in the room that are telling you they haven't had any conversations with you. And I can't speak to any of them to what's true and what's not true, but they're here today because they haven't had those conversations with you, and they're telling you they want to have those conversations. So if they want to have them, there's probably others within that net that would be willing to have the conversations as well.
Yeah, and so, and just remember that the casting of the net is, I mean, the casting of the net, when we talk about the cost to the district and such, could potentially be thousands of parcels along the Fresno River. Okay, thousands of landowners and parcels that the district would have to cast the net. We can do an isolated net of those we've already identified, but that doesn't give any certainty or finality. We can enter into agreements with those landowners, but if another one comes in the next day, the district will have to address that, in which case we're back to the table with all of those.
So the riparian rights, the only people that are entitled to those rights are those that are along the waterway.
Yes, and
So,
you see that.
So there may be small portions of acreage.
Do you see all of the?
I do.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that if you just, in your GIS system, place a filter in that essentially outlines whatever those landowners are, I mean, if I'm thinking, just because I got this number at the top of my head, irrigated acreage in Madera County that's enrolled currently in the coalition, there's only 248 landowners.
And I'll let the attorney speak to this, but riparian isn't, it's potentially not just be limited to those along the river.
So, is part of this to decide which of those riparians that are sending you those notebooks have had their rights severed already? So you're asking the state board to see if those rights have been severed by title?
Look at this, yes.
Right.
The inheritance system.
Correct. And
And
obviously, if they have been severed by title and the amount of their riparian land is limited, that would inure to the benefit of the downstream landowners who have put their land for decades to reasonable and beneficial use.
What's the process for just a private party seeing if the land's been severed by title?
I get a chain of title search and check each deed to see if there is language either carving off parcels so that you have, here's the river, here's owner A, here's owner B. Owner A is next to the river, so when he sold to owner B, unless the deed to owner B said and preserves the rights of the riparian water, then now only A has water. So you have to go through your chain of title almost from the beginning or the patent, and then look at each deed to see whether yours had that language or was severed. If your parcel's right next to the river, that's usually an easy one. It's the parcel next to that one.
So is it better for a landowner group to get together and have the structure to help people with riparian questions answer those questions rather than going to the state board?
Well, I'm not a fan of government.
Neither am I.
So I'm usually, I don't go to them necessarily to ask for help. I'm always in favor of a more negotiated, practical solution. I think as a practical matter, if you get to the adjudication, then everybody's going to kind of try and share expenses. And, Provo and Pritchard and all the other engineering firms that are swamped with people now are going to be even more swamped as everyone tries to hire them for the adjudication, be their expert witness or prove up their information. It's a costly process. This may be a less costly process, but for the landowner, in order to make sure that you have the proof, because the board's not gonna search the deeds in your best interest necessarily, you're gonna look that much more closely at everything than they would. And if they can cut off more land for agriculture, possible that they would do that. By winnowing away some of the parcels that aren't riparian, that maybe have been getting riparian water now.
What's the cost to do a riparian title search with title and lawyer? Is it about $10,000 or something?
Depends on the number of parcels.
Yeah, and how long.
Yes.
Alvin Cousins, I'm a riparian water user. How does the management determine the flow of the river? I know this year when I got, for 17, yes, when I got letters for using riparian water, it was actually water being released off of San Joaquin that they transferred across. How is that being determined if that was my riparian water coming out of San Joaquin?
So the FRAM, the model that we looked at, calculates out the entitlements and the flows and the losses. And then those have to be summed up and quantified to figure out how much needs to be released.
Because that isn't the most ideal time that San Joaquin is having releases to be using water.
Well, again, and that's the issue with using a model and the actual conditions and the reality of the situation.
But it says frozen river.
Yeah, and water was released from Hensley Lake.
No, not in one of my letters. I called in and asked.
So you're talking about water that's being released from the Madera Canal into the Fresno River?
Yes, it was coming off of San Joaquin because he had to take it or dump it down the river.
And so that, we have, our license, the Bureau's license allows them to exchange that water back up into the reservoir. As a substitute water.
A couple of comments, if I may, because Carl and I have been working on this since, for the last 9, I forget when we started.
20 years.
Okay. Mr. Kinsey mentioned that after the construction of dam, in many cases, streams went to the state board, and in fact, this stream did. That's what we spent several years. We spent thousands of dollars with regard to title information and so forth. I thought that the report that the state board made, this is the report of inspection of 2010, lent finality to the water rights on the river, and for some reason, and I don't yet understand, MID stepped in and said, well, we'll act as the water master and we'll start making decisions, and you use the model, but then you say it's not workable. So it seems one question I have is, does MID have any riparian rights on the river?
And so with respect to the issue about the 2011 being final. So the board has consternation. I'm sorry, I keep saying the board, I mean the state board has consternation and how, for example, appropriate rights, post-1914 appropriate right holders are treated on the same keel as riparian right holders. And they view that as being a flaw in the operational protocols in the FRAM. And so although it's something that they blessed in 2011, there are things about the FRAM and the FROP that they do not believe are consistent with how the river should be managed. We also have complaints that have been filed by landowners and that have frankly made a long-term resolution with long-term agreements. The one thing that I think everyone in an ideal world believes would be most prudent. The filing of those complaints, putting the 2011 documents into kind of question, or part of what put the 2011 documents into question.
And the complaints were against MID because it did allegedly what, and by what authority?
So one complaint, for example,
was by the landowner immediately downstream from your clients, who claimed that no water reached him in 2017.
Was it MID's responsibility to deliver that water?
No. It was MID's responsibility under the operational protocols to ensure that that sufficient flows were released from Hidden Dam pursuant to the protocols. And so we don't know why, for example, that landowner filed a complaint with the state board alleging issues with MID when the issues may have been with upstream landowners.
I guess my question boils down to this. What are MID's interests on the river? What is its authority? And frankly, why is MID rowing on landowners both within and outside of MID the cost of trying to deal with the state board, which, like I say, Carl and I know well, goes on for a whole long time, and frankly, we learned by chance even about this hearing. So it seems to me that what we're missing is an opportunity for the landowners to say, you know, we might be better off doing X, Y, or Z instead of going to the state board. And it seems like the landowners aren't being given that opportunity.
Yeah. So what I would say to that is we have a pot of water, so to speak. MID does have rights. I mean, to be fair, MID has pre-1914 appropriative rights and adjudicated rights to the Fresno River pursuant to Union colonization and a bunch of other opinions that you're probably aware of. In addition to some other post-1914 appropriative rights. So within this pot of water, you're absolutely correct. MID does have a share of that. Okay, but within this pot of water, there are a lot of other people who have rights to that water. Okay, and the way it's worked to date is that for every drop of that water, MID has had to carry the financial burden for every single drop. Okay, and so it shouldn't be MID's burden to be a water master, to adjudicate water rights, to be uncompensated for its management of every single drop in this bucket. So really the way MID views this is there's $100,000 sitting in a bank account. We don't know exactly to whom the $100,000 should be allocated. What we're doing is, because we have been unable to work out who's entitled to the $100,000, we're putting it into the hands of another party who's going to say who's entitled to the $100,000. And I think that everybody who's going to go into this process should understand that the state board is not going to give everybody 100% of what they believe they're entitled to. But the state board will make a determination as to what the state board believes people are entitled to, and at least provide some modicum of certainty to an otherwise complicated situation. But it has been MID to date, and MID's growers who have been paying for the management of the entire bucket, when MID growers' share of this bucket is ultimately is small in comparison to the remainder.
But that was choice of MID to get into that position, I assume.
It was not MID's choice.
Let me take your analogy a step further. You're not giving us a chance to divvy up the $100,000 ourselves. You're kicking it, up to Sacramento, where they're going to take $50,000 of the $100,000 and keep it for themselves. And we're going to have to spend $25,000 to collect $50,000.
So
give us a chance to allocate the $100,000 ourselves. Give us the chance.
So this is a flashy flood, or a flashy river. It's a little bit different than I think some of the circumstances you're referring to with the state board. But I do think that I do think this is a little bit different of a circumstance. And I think the reason why we're having a dispute
and the reason why we're having the neutral party ultimately adjudicate the dispute is because if you have 40 people entitled to the money in the bucket, and they're in particular a couple people who ultimately you're never going to be able to get agreement with.
Why does the state board have to be the neutral party?
Because they're the ultimate ones that have control.
Well, with regard to riparian rights, there's some issues about that. And it seems to me that the landowners haven't been asked, okay, here's some alternatives. You guys want to, ladies and gentlemen, want to hire a private mediator, for example? Maybe not, maybe yes, but this really gives us no choice.
But Doug, I mean, I think you can agree this is a very complicated technical situation with chains of title and, you know, and flows and models and all these different things that, I mean, even finding somebody who's qualified to be an independent mediator on this type of topic, I mean, I think would be exceptionally difficult. And it also, I don't know if really would give the legal backing to the decisions that are made.
So, and one thing, I mean, Doug, I do think that, like any formal process, there are always points in the process for people to work together, to collaborate, and to enter into discussions to try to resolve an issue. The one good thing about being in a forum with a party who, with a decision maker, the state board, who has authority to render decisions that are binding and final, would be that if I've been saying 40, if the 40 people who are interested in the waters of a river are able to come together during that process and reach a decision during that process, it is now before an entity. It is now before an entity that can actually approve that process and make it binding.
And I agree with that. I just don't want to be before an entity that has been appointed by Governor Brown or by Governor Newsom. If we put a fine point on it, and if y'all are comfortable with that, I'd be surprised.
So I think that John's talked about the timing for, you know, for filing, and then there's going to be a time period while the state board takes a look at this and decides whether, you know, to go through this process or not. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is, you know, that the riparian landowners want to try to come up with a solution. I mean, I would think that if the riparian landowners want to get organized and perhaps come up and propose a solution to MID that's also workable to MID with its pre-1914 rights, you know, being considered, then, I mean, I think that that's something we're definitely willing to listen to. And that if, you know, it can be done in this 90-day time period or whatever the case may be, then I think we would be more than willing to.
I have a question. What is Chowchilla Irrigation District doing with Chowchilla River? Both those dams were put in at the same time, and they're both flash flood dams.
Yes.
I mean, it's very similar to what they serve. So what shape are they going to try to put in people who's deciding who gets the water?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I'm personally not an expert on what Chowchilla Water District is doing with their riparian water rights, but I don't believe they have any complaints filed at the state board right now.
Yeah, the difference here is we've had complaints filed, we've had disagreements, and frankly, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes, numerous meetings. Some of you haven't had those meetings, they haven't been necessary, but there has been significant discussion. There's been significant discussion between our board members. We've explored, believe me, numerous options, but what happens is MID gets put in a very difficult position. Any move we make, someone's going to disagree with because they will be impacted. A lot of times, our goal is to try to get water out as equitable as we can. We're tasked with an impossible task. So we've tried to work with all of you over these years to get this done, but frankly, there's dead end there. All those options are working. We've tried. We've gone there. If we can get back together and try again, that's for the board to decide, but there's been a lot of effort to date to do that, and unless you have 100% buy-off, those programs don't work. And unless we can actually have factual information that we all agree on and be done with it, it's just an endless do loop of meetings and meetings that go nowhere, and the person who gets impacted the most is MID. And we're the ones that are in the odd position, or the awkward position of trying to negotiate these, resolve to only be at our detriment.
I think there's a couple of these girls won't even show up to the meeting.
It's just the
How
challenge
do you
of
get them to
getting
agree?
everybody there.
Doug?
When you
How
have-
do you get them to agree if they won't show to the meeting?
And I understand.
You know, and you know.
That is
Well, and it's not,
And that's been the problem.
and a lot of them aren't just one landowner, it's partnerships, and it's, you know, corporations, and it's multiple stakeholders involved for every single one of these. Not every single one, but a lot of these parcels.
Yeah, I have yet to hear why MID feels it's in the position of being the water master. MID, under the operational protocols and under the FRAM, has obligations. And those are conditions of the license that was issued in 2011. MID is not a water master, and it hasn't been given the hours of a water master. It hasn't been compensated like a water master. So MID is just running the numbers as best as it can, based on the data that it can, based on what it understands is the best data available, and that's the best that MID can do. And so, and yet you've got a stake in the game. So
We do.
Exactly. That's the problem.
It puts you in a.
Well, not only that,
It's a
not
horrible
only that,
position to be in.
it's not lost on us that we may be doing this to our own detriment. We don't know. But it's gotta be fixed. I mean, you know,
Well,
it may be to our own detriment.
I would encourage you to not file a paper yet, because why does the state board put any kind of a deadline on you instead of doing what? The Enforcement Division has told us, because of the complaint filed by Mr. Schaefer on behalf of his clients, that we need to act before we need to do something to move toward a comprehensive resolution before the next water season. And because of that, we have to do something.
And by the next, this water.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're in a situation where we have to act. There are enforcement. Well, we obviously disagree with the complaint, but I also know that Mr. Schaefer and his clients are not here. Well, happen to know that Mr. Schaefer is in Colorado, and that MID, I guess,
Did notify me.
didn't notify. At least I didn't know coming up to this meeting that there was going to be some discussion. Frankly, I'd rather have seen a workshop, and you've been very generous with your time, and thank you. But to hear out some of the folks who are going to get, as you say, getting thrown under the bus and not happy about it. And it's a tough situation, absolutely. Water always is, always will be. But I think the landowners who are affected, frankly, should be able to have a little more input before we have to go to the state board.
I had a quick question. Can you clarify what you meant by the water is expandable between the two dams?
So when water is being released out of the Madera Canal Bureau Supply, they can release that, and it's in the protocols to allow that. So essentially, they're taking a bureau, our contracts are both in hidden and joint contract. They're allowed to transfer, trade that water up to the residential source.
Well, I'm disappointed, I'm disappointed that we don't have a chance, or you're not thinking about giving us a chance. We have discussions that we had, we're going to continue to have with the parents downstream, and we're confident that solution can be made.
Okay, Mark,
So-
you're confident in your area down there. What about all these other people? We don't even know who all of them are. They're showing up. How are we supposed to handle those? So we get an agreement with hear me out. We're gonna get an agreement with a handful of people up here. We think we've got it all handled, somebody else shows up. Well, guess what? We're back to square one. And we have to do it again. So how far do we carry it?
Are you worried about money or time or both?
It's been costing the district a tremendous amount of money for a long time.
So do you think that money would be better handled by a grower, riparian can get this thing solved internally, than going and spending money on, I'm sorry.
You know what, I don't mind having a workshop, it'd be a great idea.
Well,
See if
it's a
you can-
process, guys.
Let's see how many people you can actually get to the table.
It's gonna be a
Because
process.
I'm pretty dubious that everybody's gonna show. And, but I don't have a problem with, personally, with a workshop.
I would rather spend money helping MID go through this process than paying the lawyers, which there will be a lot of them, working on this with the state board. I'd rather do something positive and proactive and farmer-based than have.
You understand, though, that our backs are against the wall because of these actions.
Well, you just put our backs against the wall, so.
Well, we've, you know.
And again, I want everybody to recognize, MID is not filing this against repair. MID is filing this for its own behalf on the pre-1914 water rights that the district holds for the benefit of the district. And so, I mean, I think there needs to be, I think we're commingling, this as MID's operations and with the fact that MID has its own water supplies that it also needs to represent.
All we're suggesting is that you got two complaints filed, and
many phone calls.
but if given the chance of the 40 or so of us to know what the consequences are with us, with our backs against the wall, maybe we can make those two complaints go away. And then if we make those go away, then you're going no different than the Chowchilla River, and life can go on.
But we have no resolution, Kevin. I mean, even if the complaint.
Neither does Chowchilla, they keep on keeping on.
They
Well,
also
they're-
have a dam that's twice as big as we are in a better watershed.
Well, but they, lucky them. But, no, I mean, we fully intend to have a workshop and start working through this process. I think we can do that, that's not our problem, but you gotta understand where the district is. We're in a bad position. Doug put it well, every move we make creates a problem for us, so we need to work through this, we need to resolve, we need finality, we have potential claims walking in. How do we handle those? As soon as we set the program in place, there's gonna be another claim to show up, then what? How do we resolve that issue?
I think it's a great opportunity for grower outreach.
But Mark, I mean, the reality is, I mean, it could be a parcel, I mean, half a mile away from the river that we don't identify in this process, and that later on comes back to the table, and it opens the whole door.
But how long does this adjudication take? Because that's gonna happen with the state too, and all these different things. So you're talking 10 years, 12
Yeah,
years?
but who's taking on the I mean, you talk about financial burden. Who's taking on the financial burden of attempting to identify every parcel that potentially could be considered riparian to the Fresno River and doing chains of title back to the 1800s on those?
Well, that's up to the landowner to come into that.
Well, but they can come in at a later date. That's the problem, Mark. There's no.
More likely it's gonna be severed by that time.
Well,
How do you separate them?
I
We
mean,
have no control to sever it.
Uh,
You guys don't have a way. Yeah, if we make an agreement,
How do you sever a chain of title?
I'm sorry.
How do you say, how do you get the chain of title severed on one water?
By failing to reserve the riparian water right in the deed for the parcel that's no longer touching the river. That severs it.
And in this
And I
day and
guess,
age, that,
these are-
in this
these-
day and age, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Because,
Everyone knows.
yeah, because everybody knows that they have a land that's going to be abutting the river, that if they don't include the magic words in the chain of title, that they're going to lose potential riparian
That
rights.
might happen in 60, 70, 80, 90, of course.
Right.
yeah, but who has to find that? Because if we go through and get an agreement, and all of a sudden they show up and they did have water rights because it hadn't been severed, then what do you do? Well, now you're back to square one again.
No, then we meet and adjust, like the board would. I mean, I get where you're coming from. I've been on the other side, I've been in Kenzie's seat, so I kind of get that, but I just start thinking, we've been around a long time, there's got to be other ideas we can come up with. Maybe the riparians pay money to MID for the hassle and the time. Maybe we set up another group. Maybe we come to a preliminary agreement, and if someone comes in later, then we have a method of resolution, or we say, you go to the board and you prove up. I mean, there's a variety. I guess because I'm feeling as though my client and the other growers haven't had a chance to come up with some other ideas that may work that they may be willing to do.
Yeah, and maybe this will make everybody in the room feel better, maybe it won't. But I hope everybody sees the kind of massive swaths of land between the colors, okay? And if we just proceed with the status quo, what's to stop every person along that river that doesn't have a little color, a little colored square from asserting riparian rights and using water and diminishing the flows for the people who are sitting in this room?
Well, once again, I have to say that if I'm one of the historical users, the 40 you're talking about, I would want my rights solidified so that in the age of Sigma, everyone within who knows how far doesn't make a claim on your water. I would want my rights solidified. You don't?
I've not had a single client say, I'm glad we had an adjudication. They may be out there. Certainty can be a good thing in business, but the clients that I've had involved in adjudications complain about the attorney's fees, the engineering fees, the time, and the uncertainty.
Well, right now, MID's got the brunt of that, trying to...
Well, that's where I was wondering, is there a way for the 40 to support the district rather than attack the district? I'm always looking for the win, the transactional versus litigation. I want to find the win-win that can help Dina out and not get the phone calls.
But we're talking more than 40 people here. Yeah. We're talking everybody that has a parcel along the Fresno River. And even if we got 40 people in the room, there is nothing that would adjudicate the rights to the people who are not in this room right now.
I agree, but I think there may be a way to, one, if the 40 are with MID, then we're a bigger weight against that one, prove it, show us the documentation, etc., because we collectively think we've captured. I don't know, I get that the board has that power to say this is the way it is.
Yeah, and I'm the attorney for that person, and I say you can't limit my right as a riparian unless you go to the state board.
Then I tell them you file the adjudication petition and let their lawyer advise them on the risks of that, and maybe they don't have the proof and they walk away.
And we wouldn't prefer to be in the driver's seat right now, given the historic uses that we can prove up, where at a time when there are currently a bunch of uncolored places in the middle.
They're going to be later to the party regardless if they're coming along the way.
But that won't. But that will inure to the detriment of the people with historic uses unless it goes to the state board, and the state board makes an equitable determination that their rights have been subordinated.
I'd have to give it some thought because I just learned about this yesterday when I happened to glance through your agenda from Andrea.
Question, it appears, and I can't see very well on that, but that many of those uncolored areas along the river are within MID. Is that correct? I've heard people say, well, MID would bring me into the district if I give up my riparian rights. So does that mean that the folks in MID who might have been riparian are no longer riparian?
We're not aware of any situations like that.
I'd like to give the board, Counselor, you used an analogy a moment ago. I'd like to give our board an analogy.
I like analogies.
My analogy is the voters, MID landowners, elected the board of directors. They're there to represent our best interests, not to dictate to us, or to allow an attorney to dictate to us what we think is in our best interest. They have an obligation to get input from us. And my analogy is, as farmers, I think all you guys up there have grapes. If you had a vineyard last year that was going to the winery, and it only got 8 tons of the acre, and you had a winery contract for 12 tons of the acre, and you let your foreman or your attorney make a decision on pruning where he only did base plus 1 on the pruning, so you were stuck with an 8 or 9 ton crop, you're going to be pissed because your foreman should have come to you and said, hey, how many buds, how was the crop, how many buds should I leave? And you said base plus 2 or base plus 3. I got a 12-ton contract. You didn't come to us and ask us how many buds to leave. Please have a workshop. Please defer your actions until we have a chance to try to figure this out, because it's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper to do it ourselves than to go nuclear.
Well, once again, I don't personally have a problem with a workshop, but I will tell you, Kevin, that we're not doing something we think is to the detriment of the growers and the taxpayers and the MID. We've been kicking this around a long time.
Why didn't you have
I'm not going to let John take the blame for everything. We've asked numerous questions. This just didn't happen overnight. This has been coming for a couple of years. We're trying to figure a way out of this. But now the state has put us up against the wall. And so we've been looking for a way. And we definitely didn't do this thinking that it was the worst thing for the district. And so I'm happy to have a workshop. And
I do want to say, we have been talking about this for years, and we've also had this on our agenda in different forms and fashion over the years many times about riparian issues, run of the river and such, where we've vetted a lot of these topics, in a public setting. And so, we have done a lot of things. I know it unfortunately comes as a surprise to a lot of people in this room, and, but again, this is the process, and the district's trying to represent the rights of the district as a whole, and again, it's being kind of put in a position by the State Water Resource Control Board at the moment, and deadlines associated with that. So, I think, again, there is timing associated with this, and that we can attempt to, come to a full resolution, but it needs to be a full resolution.